Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. Christian Horner has said that he does not expect Red Bull to stay as far ahead of the field as they are right now, and other teams will catch up over the course of the season. But if there is going to be one team that could put in a credible title charge, or at least try and win some races towards the end of the year, which team is that going to be? Could it be Mercedes, with George Russell suggesting their upgrades may well come earlier than they originally expected? Very much interested to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Firstly, some more drama on the Red Bull side, as there's been a lot of it in fairness over the last few days. This after the cost cap breach of last year. You guys might remember that Zach Brown wrote this letter talking about how Red Bull were cheating, and we know Zach Brown loves his sponsors, right? Because all the stuff they've done with their McLaren car this year. They've absolutely innovated the hell out of their sponsorship they can put on the car. They've got these like iPads on the McLaren rides, so they can change sponsors throughout the race. Pretty innovative stuff, but maybe they should have made their car quicker. So Horner says that these things, such as the cost cap breach last year, were used by their rivals. We had one of our rivals contact our sponsors and partners, making suggestions that we would bring their brands into disrepute. Now, as soon as people see this, they think, oh, it's Toto, he's at it again. I think that's less likely. I would say the more likely candidate here is Zach Brown of McLaren, because, you know, for the reasons I just mentioned, and he was really the one at the time pushing hard against Red Bull for the cheating cost cap breach that he perceived it to be. So Christian Horner not particularly happy that one of their rivals, potentially McLaren, we don't really know, went in what he considers an underhand way to their partners and sponsors to say, hey, you guys want to terminate your partnership with Red Bull and come and sponsor us because we don't cheat, we don't break the cost cap, and just thought that was pretty funny that Horner mentioned that in a rather spicy article that came out. Also this, I didn't mention this while it was being discussed a few days ago, but now it's been officially confirmed. Last year sometime, there was a quote that emerged from a podcast where Nelson Piquet had made quite the statement, let's just say, on Lewis Hamilton. I'm sure you guys have heard about that or can find it online somewhere. And it's now been decided that for racist and homophobic comments, he must pay almost $1 million, 5 million Brazilian reals. I'm not exactly sure where this money goes precisely. It's in moral damages, according to the court judge. Maybe some of it goes to Hamilton, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe he'll comment on it in the coming days. But yeah, the judge says the amount of compensation was given in the sense that one should not only appreciate the reparative function of civil liability, but also, and perhaps mainly, the punitive function, so that as a society, we can someday be free from the pernicious acts that are racism and homophobia. So yeah, quite the statement, I suppose. Difficult to figure out what it precisely means, but you get the point, right? And Piquet's been severely punished for those comments that were made and caused outrage really when they surfaced around about, you know, several months ago at this point. So Red Bull have dominated the season so far, 1-2s at both the first couple of races, but Horner says, look, we've got to make hay while the sun shines, and they can't guarantee they're going to keep up this level of dominance over the course of the season. By the time, if there will be any convergence, as Horner seems to expect, this is what he says to the media. Whether he really expects any other team to catch up, I don't really know, but look, at the end of the day, they want to make sure they can get as many points as they can, so that they can sew up the championship, both championships potentially, by the time another car comes around. Kind of funny comment here, right? So I'm expecting to see an awful lot of convergence during the course of the year, so we need to make hay while the sun shines, while we've got a competitive car, which kind of implies that at some point they won't have a competitive car, as if they're going to drop to being like 5th on the grid, which is obviously not going to happen. But yeah, while they've got a competitive car, they've got to maximize their potential. Now, it's going to take a long time and a lot of work for any other team to catch up to Red Bull. Aston are the closest right now, but Mercedes potentially have the greatest room for improvement with their concept, with upgrades coming shortly as well. Toto Wolff has made it very clear that they're not concerned about making their car look like a Red Bull if that is the fastest concept, which I imagine they now believe that it is. So as a result, Red Bull, Mercedes, Black Bull, whatever, that might well be a thing we see relatively soon when the upgrades arrive. Even though Hamilton did say the other day, you can't just chuck the Red Bull side pods on the Mercedes and it's going to go a second lap faster. Like all the car has to work together in that sense. You can't just put like different side pods on that the car goes quicker. Like all the elements of the car have to combine into the optimal airflow, which means that the Mercedes might take inspiration from the Red Bull, but won't probably be an exact replica. At least this season, they, to be honest, don't have the money in the cost cap to actually invest in an entire overhaul or a B-spec car or anything, or a chassis change until next season. So it's a tall order for Mercedes, but they do plan shortly to bring big upgrades upgrades. Now, James Vowles, actually, of now Williams, but worked with Mercedes during this project, says that from his understanding, this W14 will still be mighty at certain tracks. I believe he looked at Silverstone, and he said Silverstone and Barcelona specifically, those circuits seem to be very good for the Mercedes, and he reckons that will continue this year as well. Now, yes, Mercedes might be mighty at those tracks this year, but that's mighty in comparison to what? Comparison to Ferrari, they might look mighty a lot of circuits this year. Compared to Red Bull, could be a very different story, but there is still some optimism within Mercedes and even outside of Mercedes that they can turn this around quickly. Hamilton was back in the simulator just yesterday, getting the reps in at Jeddah just to compare what he experienced in the car and what happened in the simulator, what happened with the upgrades they brought to that weekend. Only a couple of small tweaks, but it did unlock some performance for them, we'll see here in a second, and also the changes there to bring going forwards, going to Australia. He said, I was on the simulator yesterday, I was with the engineers at the factory, so we're going through all of what we've done so far during testing, through to the first couple of races, doing some correlation work for Jeddah, then we're working on the prep for Melbourne coming up just next weekend. So Mercedes also said though, that they reckon they're in something like a 6 to 12 month knowledge deficit to Red Bull, which is a massive disadvantage. In fairness, I think that they said even last year they were like a year behind, which effectively they are in development, and they haven't really caught any of that up. They might have done had they have got this year's concept correct, but clearly they didn't, so there's a long way still to go, and based on these kind of numbers, you've got to think that it's out of reach realistically for Mercedes to challenge for, well, a title is completely out of reach, I think. Even race wins is going to be hard, and of course their number one goal right now, or their first step, can't really be to challenge Red Bull. The first step is to beat Aston Martin, right? To consistently beat Ferrari, and then to catch them and overtake Aston Martin. That's got to be the short-term goal here for Mercedes, because you can't think about Red Bull while Aston Martin, your customer team, are still in the way, and Aston have potentially more room for improvement. Their base concept, the Aston, is better than the base concept to the Mercedes is. They have more development time and resources based on finishing lower in the championship last year. So if there is any challenge on for the championship, I still think that Aston Martin will have to lead the charge. But over the season, I do have more faith in Mercedes, given their experience putting together a more competitive upgrade package over the course of the year, and that is going to arrive, the first parts of it, relatively soon. They did bring some new parts, a couple of new things to Jeddah. They will bring probably a couple of new things to Australia. That will unlock some small element of performance, but the big changes will come potentially sooner than they originally suggested. At the start of the season, the big conversation was Baku is the big upgrade. Race 4 of the season, that's when the upgrades are going to arrive. The same story for the McLaren upgrades as well. However, after they realised, wow, this car really isn't looking particularly good, we've got to make some serious changes, then they pushed that back to Imola. However, George Russell says that from his understanding, they might be able to do it slightly earlier than that. He says, we definitely made a step in the right direction in Jeddah. We know we've got some more performance in the locker for races to come with some small tweaks they're bringing through. Maybe Imola time they can bring some big things. Perhaps we can bring it a little bit earlier. The full quote went on to say this. Maybe those big upgrade packages will come to Imola, I believe the 6th race of the season. Maybe it can be done a little earlier, but I think you're always a little cautious about taking things to a street track like Baku, because, you know, if they're going to do it, because there's a back-to-back race weekend in Baku and Miami, like obviously both street tracks, but for geographical reasons, usually if you're going to bring upgrades, it's going to happen for a European round, especially at this point in the season. So Baku is an option. Imola is the most sensible option and probably what will happen here for whatever Mercedes big package is that they're working on. But they've got this one event or one race here in Australia, and then there's a month off where China was meant to be. So the team has a lot of time to prepare things ahead of Baku, and that's what they may be able to do. But of course, a street track is a bit different, and you've got to be 120% sure, he says, you've chosen the right direction. So they might wait longer just to ensure that what they're doing is correct. But the longer you wait, the greater the impact you can have because of the slope of development and understanding off the track. But then you get less performance on the track, which hurts you in terms of point standing. So there is a bit of something to be weighed up there. My guess is that they'll probably wait until Imola to bring this big upgrade package, but it does seem like they might be working on it somewhat faster than expected. Toto Wolff was very optimistic a few days ago about how much progress they've been making behind the scenes since taking this drastic shift in the direction they're going for, and we might see the first signs of that in Imola. We might see, if George Russell is correct about doing it a little bit earlier, we might see the first signs of that in Baku, which isn't too far away, all things considered. And also just to mention that rumours that were circulating that the upgrade they brought to Jeddah, a floor upgrade, not too much they changed, was worth about a 1/10 of a second. So that seemed to be enough, with Ferrari struggling on the hards, to give Mercedes the advantage over the Ferrari and bring them in relative terms slightly closer in performance to the Aston Martin. And overtaking them really is the first step in a pretty long recovery process. Toto Wolff even went on to talk about Niki Lauda and his loss just a few years ago runs deep at Mercedes. He said that, you know, they're missing the guidance of Niki Lauda in difficult times like these, which is understandable. But, you know, Toto Wolff, obviously, this is what he gets paid the big bucks for. During the period of domination, he was doing a great job, of course. Obviously, looks like he's doing a great job from the outside. This is his real test as team principal at Mercedes, trying to take them from where they are now back to where they belong, in their opinion, right at the top of Formula One. So very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.